Older, wiser, and grayer, but back in the same room for the first time in ages. It's Eric and Tom with the Paperback Warrior Podcast.
Welcome to the Paperback Warrior Podcast. We're bringing you episode number 97 today, straight out of the Sunshine State here in Florida. Believe it or not, Tom is in the same room with me, and he's going to come on in just a little while. Our show stems from our active blog at paperbackwarrior.com, where you can find hundreds and hundreds of quality reviews covering science fiction, crime noir, action-adventure, espionage, horror, gothic romance, military fiction, and westerns. That's a lot. You can check out the blog each weekday morning for a brand new review because, we're superhuman and we read a book or short story per day. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and dozens upon dozens of podcasting platforms. Tom, please advise these dedicated fans and followers that you, indeed, are finally in the same room with me.
I am here in the flesh. Actually, you're at my house, so
That's right.
You're in the same room as me, technically. Today, though, on the show, we're going to be discussing Eric's most recent contributions to Brash Books, a publishing house founded by authors Lee Goldberg and Joel Goldman, and the subsidiary imprint Cutting Edge Books. This ties in today's feature on author Jon Messmann. He was a prolific writer of action-adventure novels, mystery thrillers, and westerns. He created one of the longest-running western series titles of all time, The Trailsman. He also contributed to Nick Carter Killmaster and comic strips and books. In today's feature, we're going to look at Messmann's career, talk about a few of his books, series titles, and his transition from comic books to paperback original novels. In addition to today's feature, I'm going to be reviewing a novel called The Mob Says Murder by Marvin Albert, writing as Albert Conroy. Eric, you're going to be reviewing a Jon Messmann standalone mystery called Bullet for the Bride. Now, Eric, before the show, you had a literary question for me, and you're absolutely positive that I don't have the answer. I find it hard to believe, considering I am a worldly scholar of vintage literature. Lay it on me, brother. I am ready and willing to educate you and all of our listeners in this final Jeopardy question.
You're so boastful. Here you go. What author was deemed America's Agatha Christie?
You know my Achilles heel here. I think that's probably a lot of women who have been either self-proclaimed America's Agatha Christie or had their publisher make that claim on their behalf. I just read precious few women whodunit authors, so it's not a real fair question to me. But based solely on my browsing at bookstores, I'd probably say, Dorothy Hitchens? I don't even know if she's American. I couldn't pick her out of a police lineup, so this is a completely unfair question. Eric, fill me in. What is the answer? You're embarrassing me in public.
Yeah, not to be mean about it, but I felt pretty confident that you wouldn't know the answer to this, so I didn't know the answer either. So I was in Best Used Books, which you've frequented in the past in Orlando, and I was browsing the mystery section, and I found an author. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right. Mignon G. Eberhardt.
Okay, I've seen that author. I didn't know it was a woman.
Yeah, so it's a woman, and man, Tom, they had stacks of this author's books, and they all have like this amazing, like really vivid, terrifying artwork. And some of them are like something you'd see on like the cover of Eerie or Creepy magazine, one of those old school horror comic books. Considering the cost of my kids' braces, though, I just purchased one book by the author, and I just left the rest of them for you to buy.
Fair enough.
Yeah. The book I purchased is called Run Scared. It was published by Popular Library in 1963. When I got home, I consulted a book that I think you gave me a couple years ago, The 20th Century Crime and Mystery Writers.
Oh, that's such a good resource.
I found her in there, and I discovered that she's widely considered to be the American version of Agatha Christie. Not necessarily based on style, I guess, but in terms of sales. Tom, Eberhardt was probably second only to Agatha Christie in terms of global sales. And man, she was a rock star for the publisher. She lived from 1899 through 1996, and she authored books and short stories from the 1920s through the 80s. So you're talking about 7 decades of production.
Oh, man.
She wrote over 50 standalone crime fiction and mystery novels. She also authored a 7-book series of detective novels starring Sarah Keat, registered nurse, that assist her boyfriend, Detective Lance O'Leary, in solving murder mysteries. Boy, that one sounds right up your alley, doesn't it? The second Sarah Keat novel won Eberhardt $5,000 from the Crime Club Booksellers Association, which awarded the book the Scotland Yard Prize. And like $5,000 in 1930 is like the equivalent of 87 grand today. I looked into it.
It's big money.
Yeah. Of the 7 Sarah Keat novels, at least 6 were adapted into films. 2 more films were adapted from her standalone novels. The cool thing is that Eberhardt is considered the early pioneer of featuring a female in the lead role as, the sleuth or the detective. A year after her first novel was published, Agatha Christie authored the first Jane Marple novel. And so 1 year after that.
Miss Marple, yeah.
Miss Marple, which was her star female detective. But anyhow, I'm going to read Run Scared. And even if I don't like it, she has so many novels to choose from. I'm sure there's something good out there.
Oh, that's cool. I'm itching to know how she is, because I see her books all over the place. I've just never picked one up. And I'm not hostile to the Agatha Christie style of whodunit. I think there's just something nice and pure about that.
Yeah. And I've never read an Agatha Christie novel, shamefully.
I read 10 Little Indians, also known as And Then There Were None, also known as another title that we can't say in public.
Right, yes.
In high school, actually. They taught my English teacher taught that in high school. It's an excellent book. It's a really good whodunit. And we've seen that kind of plot device of having a bunch of people in a confined space getting killed off one at a time, knowing that one of the people there is the murderer, and you don't really know till the very end who it is. So I'm all about Agatha Christie. I should probably read more of her.
So, Tom, tell me a little bit about something that you said you've been working on with Starkhouse.
Yeah, I had a cool opportunity to write the introduction to a new Harry Whittington twofer from Starkhouse that collects A Ticket to Hell from 1959 and Hell Can Wait from 1960. Now, the problem I faced with this assignment is that there have been so many Harry Whittington reprints with their own introductions written by people way smarter than me, and so I decided to take the assignment and do something completely different. As listeners may recall, I was an FBI special agent for 26 years, and I retired a little over a year ago to start my own private detective agency here in Florida. And so my introduction to the Starkhouse volumes is called Investigating Harry. And it's a true story about a road trip I took to Harry Whittington's childhood hometown of Ocala, Florida, to see what I could learn about Harry Whittington. And so I tried to make my introduction read like a short story about a private eye investigating this long-dead author. And it was a fun trip, and actually I enjoyed writing the piece quite a bit. The book itself is available on Amazon or the Starkhouse website. I should also mention that the 2 novels are both really good, and we've reviewed them both on Paperback Warrior if you want to learn more about A Ticket to Hell and Hell Can Wait. But, screw Harry Whittington. Buy the book for my intro, which is an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, exactly. I read A Ticket to Hell, and I read your intro too, and I second all that. They're both really, really good. But we got a lot to talk about with Mr. Jon Messmann. So you okay if we move over to the feature?
Yeah, let's do it. Go for it.
All right, here's some transition music. As Tom mentioned earlier, today's feature is on author Jon Messmann. He authored a ton of books across a lot of genres, and he remains relevant today thanks to the efforts of brash books and cutting-edge books. Whether you like men's action-adventure or adult westerns, mysteries, vigilante stuff, even comic books, graphic novels, and those gothic paperbacks, there's something for everyone when it comes to Jon Messmann. So let's get into it. Jon Messmann was born in 1920. His parents forced him to play violin, and some sources stated he really disliked playing music, but as a kid, what are you going to do? But Messmann really enjoyed writing. In 1940, he began writing for the up-and-coming comic industry, a period known as the Golden Age of comic books. His first gig was for Fawcett Comics, an early successful book publisher of that era. His co-workers were like a dream team of comic book icons. We're talking about Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, Chick Stone. Messmann wrote for a decade on titles like Captain Marvel Jr., Human Torch, Submariner, Gabby Hayes, Don Winslow of the Navy, Tex Ritter, and Nyoka the Jungle Girl. In 1950, Messmann co-created Carousel, an 8-page tabloid comics section in the Pittsburgh Courier. This featured many of Messmann's comic ideas, like secret agents, historical romance, sea adventure, private eyes, jungle girls, and even some fairy tales. Carousel lasted 5 years and was distributed by New York's Smith Man Syndicate. But Messmann, he really wanted to get into writing full-length paperback originals. Beginning in the 1960s, Messmann's transition into paperback full-length novels began with Lyle Kenyon Ingalls' star franchise, Nick Carter Killmaster. We've done podcast episodes on both of those. Lyle Kenyon Ingalls' book creations and Nick Carter as well.
They're the two brand names of paperback adventure fiction.
Yeah. If you aren't familiar with Nick Carter, go back and play the 25th episode of this show. It's a mammoth overview of all things Nick Carter, from books, television, and so forth. We recently posted a Paperback Warrior primer on Nick Carter as well. On the desktop version of the site, just find Nick Carter on the right column and maybe block off about 10 minutes of your day to get caught up on that. Messmann's first contribution to the Nick Carter Killmaster series was its 37th installment, a book called 14 Seconds to Hell, published in 1968. The series, authored by a selection of ghostwriters under the name Nick Carter, was like a really firm stepping stone for Messmann. This really got him his start. The series paralleled a lot of the pulp terms that Messmann was using in the past, the campy, over-the-top, secret agent action. Messmann's experience writing comics and comic strips made him a viable workhorse for Ingle to rely on. The author contributed 14 more installments of the Nick Carter series through 1970 before departing. Most Nick Carter fans will list Messmann in the higher tier of series contributors. His work on that series was just, rock solid. Now, Ingle, pleased with Messmann's production, paired him with another Killmaster author named George Snyder, and they collaborated on a series called Hotline in 1970.
I'd forgotten he was one of the Hotline guys. Okay,
Yeah.
Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it lasted only 3 installments.
Yeah, I have those.
But yeah, Messmann contributed on the debut,
Okay.
Our Spacecraft is Missing. Again, this allowed Messmann to develop a modern secret agent, in this case, a president's man type of hero named Fowler. Now, also in 1970, while writing Killmaster novels, Messmann wrote 2 books starring a vagabond hero named Logan. These were inspired by John D. MacDonald's successful character Travis McGee. The books are Logan and Killers at Sea. Both are authored under the pseudonym Alan Joseph, and both books have been reprinted by Brash Books as new editions under Jon Messmann's name. These original paperbacks are really hard to find, and they've been long out of print, so thanks to Lee Goldberg, they're available again. I read them both. The first book, Logan, is awesome. The main character has a boat called the Sea Urchin, and he does odd jobs for money. He's in South America, and he gets framed for murder, so the Peruvian government, they're agreeing to bail him out, but only if he will complete a job for them. And the job's good. I mean, it pays $10,000, and all he has to do is sail upriver to a remote village, dig up a grave, and provide positive ID of the man in the coffin. I mean, it's easy money. Wrong. Logan's in the fight of his life as he takes on armed villagers. He has boat chases. There's lots of gunfire. There's a beautiful woman, and she's probably got sort of a secret agenda behind the whole thing. I thought it was fantastic. The sequel is called Killers at Sea, and this one puts Logan on the shore of a small South Carolina town. Here he discovers a corpse on the beach, making him the prime suspect according to the police. But the dead man apparently died protecting something of immense value. Soon, bad guys come gunning for Logan, thinking he stole this important item from the corpse. It's a twisty sort of narrative that's ripe with action and crime fiction elements, and I didn't like it as much as Logan, but Killers at Sea is still really, really good. And again, both of these books are now available in new affordable editions, and you can buy them on Amazon. Tom, you remember the books that I talk about often on this show with the beautiful women running from the big mansion?
Yes, I've always been dying to know exactly what are they running from in that mansion, and why is there only one light on in the whole house on the second floor?
Yeah, it was. It's crazy, and I just recently checked, Tom, and this is embarrassing. I counted my Gothics. I have 160 Gothic paperbacks.
That's right. These Gothic romance titles were really popular. They had their moment, and they were everywhere in the 1960s and 70s. And I guess there's still a cult following, and you have joined that cult, huh?
Apparently, I'm looking for the one that really knocks my socks off, and I haven't found it.
So, but you're going to keep reading this whole genre until you find one you really like. Okay.
I know. I just keep doing it. I don't know.
You're
I'm
a
sucker for
glutton
punishment.
Yeah.
So just like Gil Brewer, Dean R. Koontz, Gardner F. Fox, and so forth, Messmann also joined in the fun of writing Gothic paperbacks. And the pseudonym he used is Claudette Nicole. And the books, there's a lot of them. There's Bloodroots Manor, Mistress of Orion Hall, Dark Mill, Haunted Heart. You get the idea. I had the opportunity to read one of Messmann's Gothics called Circle of Secrets. It was originally published in 1972. The story has this creepy concept. Two girls named Kim and Mary Ellen went to college together. After they graduate, the two still communicate by phone or through the mail. They don't physically see each other. So one day, Mary Ellen calls and seems really distressed and sort of out of it. Kim, worried about her, decides that she's finally going to go visit her old friend. But before she leaves, a letter is overnighted to her, and in it is a deed to Mary Ellen's house. This beautiful old plantation off the coast of Georgia.
Don't do it.
The paperback states that Kim is now the new owner. Obviously, Kim hightails it to Georgia to find out what's going on with Mary Ellen. When she arrives at the old plantation, she finds a grave that shows that Mary Ellen died 3 years ago. Who in the world has Kim been talking to on the phone for the last 3 years? So the creepy factor hits like a 10. The Circle of Secrets becomes more of a murder mystery as Kim tries to determine what happened to Mary Ellen and why someone's out to murder her too. So it's got Gothic elements. It's got a little bit of a supernatural vibe. I really didn't like the book's ending, but overall it was really fun to read it. And I think, I'm not sure, I'll have to verify, but Brash Books may be reprinting this one as well. They've reprinted a couple other of the Gothics that Messmann wrote.
Can I interject with a quick story just to make myself relevant in the story? And I guess I don't know that Lee would mind, but Lee engaged me as his private investigator to track down Jon Messmann's heirs, and so he could get in touch with them and obtain the publication rights to the Jon Messmann library, the stuff that they own. Like, they don't own the Nick Carter Killmaster stuff because that's still owned by Lyle Engel. But the other stuff, so I had a little piece of history there as far as bringing Jon Messmann back to life, as far as introducing the Messmann family to Lee Goldberg.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
After Mac Bolan's saga was unveiled in the hit series The Executioner in the late 60s and early 70s, publishers began searching for vigilante fiction. In 1973, Signet began publishing a vigilante series called The Revenger, written by Jon Messmann. The series stars a military veteran named Ben Martin running a small grocery store in New York. He's got a wife and son, and he's living this peaceful existence until the mob approaches him with a protection racket. Tom, I see these things all the time, and you're a highly sought-after private detective, and you've got an uncanny knowledge of crime fiction. How does a protection racket work anyway?
Okay, so the way it's that old thing where the mobster comes to your business and says, this is a really nice storefront window. It'd be a real shame if something happened to it. And so basically you're paying this mobster to not bust your windows or burn down your place. Now, I'm from Chicago, and when I used to go to Chicago Bulls games at the United Center, I'd often find street parking in the neighborhood, which is kind of a rough neighborhood, and young urban teenage kids would ask me if I wanted them to, quote, watch my car while I was at the game. And I knew that there was an implied threat there, but you can also be damn sure I gave them $5 in their little protection racket. So that's really kind of what was going on there, and I'm sure that's what Jon Messmann was referring to by the protection racket in the novel.
So in these protection rackets, okay, so so the guy says, I don't want to do it, which is what Ben does in this book.
Big mistake.
And so they tear up his store or whatever. Aren't they just defeating the whole purpose? Now he can't pay them any money because he's out of business.
Well, yeah, but it also sends a message to the neighborhood on what happens if you say no.
Okay, all right, makes sense. One of those things. It's a domino effect. So yeah, Ben refuses to pay the mob, and they come at him hard. They end up killing his kid. So Martin transforms back from this, mild-mannered grocery guy into a military mindset, and he takes on the mob. In these novels, revenge is always the only recourse, so thus the Revenger rises. By the end of the first book, the supposed end of Ben Martin's war, Readers are left to arrive at their own conclusions. And why was that? The Revenger wasn't planned as a series. There's nothing to indicate that Signet had any other plans for Messmann or the Ben Martin character. The paperback spine, front, back covers, and last pages are devoid of anything suggesting that this is a series debut. But it was, only Signet and Messmann didn't know it. At the very least, the sales must have been satisfactory to warrant a sequel. By that point, 5 more novels became the new goal. So Messmann crafted these novels through 1975 with titles that certainly resonate the 1970s men's action-adventure flair. Fire in the Streets, Vendetta Contract, Stiletto Signature, City for Sale, Promise for Death.
The titles make you want to read them.
It does. While Revenge is mostly the catalyst for the first novel, Martin's life continues to be plagued by violence. Each novel builds to a crescendo, with revenge as more of a silent motivator. In many ways, Martin could be the most complex vigilante in terms of repressed feelings and temperament. In the second installment, Martin becomes a vigilante, but he doesn't really want the burden of doing it. He's still dreaming of a life that once was, an existence that was robbed from him by the events outside of his control. And you can read the reviews of the Revenger novels at paperbackwarrior.com, where I talk a little bit more about this. Just look for Revenger or Jon Messmann on the right side menu. And once again, the entire 5-book series is available through Brash Books, and you can order them on Amazon in digital and physical copies. There's also, I think, an omnibus that has all of them collected into one volume. But aside from being great books, the first novel features my introduction about the author, series, and character, and my intro also delves into that time period of publishing and how vigilante fiction was really evolving at that time. Jon Messmann created another character in 1973 as well, a Jefferson Boone handyman, sometimes just referred to as Handyman series. It's another series standout featuring a U.S. State Department agent extinguishing international flare-ups that could adversely affect America and its allies. It has the same action-oriented intensity as The Revenger, complete with the main character getting laid like a lot. I reviewed the series debut on the blog, and I really enjoyed it. He's a competent hero. He has a red Ford Mustang, and he's tough as nails, as if those two go together. The entire 6-book Handyman series has been released in new editions by Brash Books as well. You can also get them in digital, physical formats, and I know there's an omnibus out there that has all of them together.
Let me put you on the spot. What do you think is a stronger series?
Revenger.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, The Revenger. It's got more psychological suspense. The character's more dynamic.
Yeah.
Jefferson Boone probably would appeal to more of the spy fans, a little bit more James Bond or Remington Steele.
Got it.
Yeah, but still really good. I had the opportunity to write an introduction for the Handyman debut, and also how that character differs from the Revenger. And I touched on some of the real-world transitions of literature at that time that elevated espionage fiction from really the safer James Bond universe into something that was far more dangerous and deadly. I think you had what was it, the Munich Olympics around that time period. It changed everything. The sexual escapades of both Ben Martin and Jefferson Boone, and theoretically the Nick Carter series before that, led Messmann to what would ultimately become his meal ticket.
All right, so you're probably talking about The Trailsman, which is one of the big 4 adult Western series titles, along with Long Arm, Slocum, and Gunsmith. In these series titles, including The Trailsman, 180-page paperbacks were produced, I think, about monthly under a house name. In this case, it was John Sharp. And they were good Western adventure stories, but what differed them from the Westerns of the past 100 years was that they were littered with graphic sex scenes, kind of sprinkled throughout the novels as the contracts were demanded. By 1978, adult Western fiction had risen to prominence and was really led by Lou Cameron's creation, the Long Arm series. The concept was simply to incorporate 2 or 3 graphic sex scenes into what would otherwise be just a traditional Western. The main character, in the case of The Trailsman, that guy's named Sky Fargo. He fights the bad guys, he pleases the bad girls. Now, Messmann created the Trailsman series in 1980 for Signet. And just like Don Pendleton's Executioner, he created this iconic hero, Sky Fargo, who has these blue eyes and these a bed mattress Olympian.
I like
and he
that.
places him in nearly 400 total installments. Of those, Messmann wrote about nearly half of those until he retired from the series. Now, what the series that I like even better, though, is much shorter. Messmann created a series called Canyon O'Grady, which existed in the Sky Fargo Trailsman universe. There are a couple crossovers where they work together, and it's also written by the same pseudonym, John Sharp. Canyon O'Grady was he was almost like a special agent, Old West special agent who answered to the president directly. Messmann authored 3 installments in the Canyon O'Grady series: Dead Man's Trails, Silver Slaughter, and Shadow Guns. The idea is that Canyon O'Grady was an agent for the President of the U.S., going on missions in the Old West and getting laid. It's a really good series. Robert Randizzi wrote a bunch of them as well, and I think Chet Cunningham wrote a few. It was rumored that Messmann had never actually been to the western regions of the U.S. Instead, he wrote every Trailsman and Canyon O'Grady novel from the comfort of his Manhattan apartment.
I found that hard to believe. I mean, those novels are so descriptive, but I guess National Geographic?
Yeah, Trailsman novels are good. I would say they're my least favorite of the Big Four series. Actually, now they're better than Slocum. They're number 3. Only because I like the ones where the hero kind of blows into a small, dusty town. Trailsman was really on the trail a lot. So he was doing a lot more fighting of Indians and kind of dealing with settlers who were kind of in their stagecoaches being menaced by one person or another. I preferred the Gunsmith or the Long Arm series because in those series the hero is just sort of blowing into a small town that has its issues, and the Long Arm series were mostly sort of mysteries in disguise anyway. But Trailsman's a fine series. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you're into.
And his idea of having romance and graphic sex in these books, I guess, kind of led him to dip his typewriter into romance waters. So using the pseudonym Pamela Windsor, he wrote 3 romance novels for Jove: Forsaking All Others in 1977, Rebel's Rapture in 79, and At Passion's Tide in 1980. I'm sure they're pretty good. He also authored a horror novel called The Deadly Deep in 1976 for New American Library.
I'd like to read that.
I would too, and I've never seen it out in the wild.
I've never even heard of it.
Thrillers like Phone Call for Signet in 1979 and Jogger's Moon in 1980 for Penguin, and the Western The Last Snow in 1989 for Random House. And I think The Last Snow has been reprinted as well by Brash or Cutting Edge. And I've never seen Phone Call or Jogger's Moon out in the wild. I think Jogger's Moon is a hardback, actually.
I've seen Phone Call around. I may have it. I would need to check, but it looks good. It's got like a picture of a phone that's like dripping blood. And, I think it was back in the era where like obscene phone callers was like a real big thing before caller ID.
Or he's calling from in the house.
Yeah, that jam. Yeah.
He also authored the standalone crime fiction / mystery novel, A Bullet for the Bride, in 1972, which was published by Pyramid. And I'm going to review that book at the end of this episode. So Jon Messmann, he died in 2004 at the age of 84, and he was in a New York nursing home at the time. So that's kind of sad.
It's sad that he's dead. I wish he was 130 years old now.
Yeah, really. I'm sure he's cranking out novels.
Yeah.
So thanks to Lee Goldberg, James Reasoner, the Spy Guys and Gals blog for helping us put the feature together. And that's really all I have. Tom, do you want to tell them about your book?
Yeah, let's switch gears. My review is a novel called The Mob Says Murder. Now, the book was written by Philadelphia native Marvin Albert under his popular pseudonym Albert Conroy. He utilized a lot of pseudonyms in his writing and for innovative crime and Western novels in the mid-20th century. As far as I could tell, he wrote 14 paperbacks as Albert Conroy or Al Conroy between the years 1952 and 1972, including this one we're talking about, which is a standalone paperback from 1958 called The Mob Says Murder. It's about this guy named Eddie Driscoll. He's 6 years into his state prison life sentence for a fatal bank robbery that he did not commit. In his day, he did plenty of bank holdup jobs. He's a real live bank robber. He just didn't do the one that landed him in the penitentiary. So one day, Driscoll gets an unexpected visitor in prison who helps him break out. And it was about as good a prison break as I've ever read in Pulp Fiction. Before you know it, Driscoll goes from a lonely, horny inmate to a most wanted fugitive. Now, the person pulling the strings to orchestrate his shaky freedom is a mobster named Bruno Hauser, who runs a nightclub and an illegal gambling joint called the Ocean Club. Now, Hauser has a problem. There's an anti-crime governor who has been sending state law enforcement goons into Hauser's joint to bust up the place and interrupt business. Hauser's solution is that the governor must go. Now, the reason that our hero Driscoll is involved in this at all is because the same governor was once the prosecutor who wrongfully put Driscoll away for life. Now, after his guilty verdict 6 years ago, Driscoll swore revenge on the prosecutor, and Hauser is hoping to utilize Driscoll as an assassin to remove their shared enemy from office permanently. After all, busting a guy out of prison means he owes you a big favor, right? Albert has crafted another crime noir masterpiece here. I thought I knew where the plot was headed based on the cover art spoiler, but it quickly became clear that the artist and the copywriter had never read this book themselves. The novel's characters are vivid and the dilemmas, both practical and moral, are taken really seriously by the author. The relationships between the characters are well drawn, and there's a dose of humanity to this ultra-violent and sexy 141-page Lost classic. The plot of this book is perfectly constructed and the dialogue is crisp. There is absolutely nothing to dislike about this book. The Mob Says Murder is another work of just pulp literary greatness by Marvin Albert. The more I read from this guy, the more I come to believe that he was an excellent, absolutely unique writer of the era, and just really a head and shoulders above his peers. Now, what I don't get is for reasons absolutely unclear to me, this one has never been reprinted since it hit the spinner racks in 1958. Maybe someone out there is going to listen to this podcast and hear this review and do something about that. I know that the Albert Estate is open for business and other places have had luck reprinting his books. Someone should reprint The Mob Says Murder. It is something really special. Again, the book is The Mob Says Murder. You'll only find it used at this point by Albert Conroy, who is really Marvin Albert. Eric, give me your review.
All right, so my review is Jon Messmann's A Bullet for the Bride, which was published in 1972 by Pyramid, with an original cover that just suggests that it's like this murder mystery or cozy, kind of a cozy quilt mystery, I guess. But in reality, it's an awesome action-adventure novel, and it's set in the Gulf of Mexico, featuring a retired CIA operative cracking down on an illegal arms dealer. In this case, the retired CIA operative is Captain Ed Steele, who now spends his days resting and relaxing on his boat called the Squid. Occasionally, he takes part-time jobs from his former boss named Byron that involve surveillance and Steele's boat. A sexy young woman named Cam calls Steele on a reference from Byron. She wants him to investigate her wealthy father's new girlfriend. Cam thinks her father is in love with a criminal, but Steele thinks this is just a case of the jealous daughter having daddy issues and being insecure that he's found his true love. So Steele discovers that Cam may be onto something. The girlfriend, who's a real knockout for an older lady, is running a fake company that appears to be a front for an illegal arms smuggling trade into Cuba. The book has sex, action-adventure, fighting, espionage, and it is great. It was clear that Captain Ed Steele was supposed to be a series, but it just, for whatever reason, never worked out. I'm not sure why. The book's been long out of print, but thankfully has now been released in a new edition by Cutting Edge. You can get physical digital copies, and I recommend it for fans of John D. MacDonald's Travis McGee or Messmann's own Handyman series. And that's all I have on Jon Messmann's A Bullet for the Bride.
Well, I think that's plenty for now. It's great to be back in the room with you, Eric. And so that is a wrap on another informative episode of the Paperback Warrior podcast. Remember, fans, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and tell your friends, neighbors, coworkers, family, and anyone you meet on the street to check us out as well. Remember to subscribe or like us everywhere because we are easily the most likable dudes you've ever met. We plan on airing other brand new episodes later this month, and you can check that out at paperbackwarrior.com each weekday for a brand new review. On behalf of Eric, we will see you next time. Be cool.